The morning sun cast long shadows across the Afghan mountains as Sarah Mitchell adjusted her scope for the 100th time. 3 days she had been lying in this rocky outcrop, waiting for the perfect moment. Her spotter, Marcus, whispered coordinates through the radio while scanning the valley below with his binoculars. Sarah was not like other soldiers. At 28, she had already earned a reputation that made hardened warriors nervous. They called her the Angel of Death, though never to her face. Her record spoke louder than any nickname. 847 confirmed kills across 4 deployments. Each number represented a life taken, a mission completed, a threat eliminated. The target today was different. Colonel Rashid Hassan, a Taliban commander, responsible for coordinating attacks that had killed dozens of coalition forces. Intelligence suggested he would appear at the compound below sometime before noon. Sarah's job was simple: wait, aim, fire. One shot to end months of planning and surveillance. But as she lay there, something felt wrong. The compound bustled with unusual activity. Women moved between buildings carrying bundles. Children played in the courtyard. This was supposed to be a military meeting, not a family gathering. Sarah's finger hovered over the trigger guard, but she did not move it to the trigger itself. Marcus noticed her hesitation. "What's the problem? We have clear intel on this." Sarah studied the scene through her scope. Her training told her to follow orders. Her instincts told her something was off. She had learned to trust both, but today they conflicted. The mission briefing had been clear: eliminate Hassan when he appeared. No questions, no delays. Years of warfare had hardened Sarah's heart, but she still remembered why she became a sniper. Protection, precision, clean eliminations that saved more lives than they took. She thought about her younger brother Tommy, killed in Iraq by an IED. She thought about her team members who had died because enemies like Hassan walked free. The radio crackled with updates from command. Hassan's vehicle had been spotted approaching the compound. Sarah's breathing slowed as she entered the zone, that mental state where everything else disappeared except the target and the shot. Her heart rate dropped. Her hands steadied. The world narrowed to what she could see through the scope. Then she saw him. Colonel Hassan stepped out of a dust-covered truck, wearing traditional Afghan clothing instead of military gear. He embraced an elderly woman who came running from the main building. Sarah could see his face clearly through the magnification, weathered, tired, but smiling as he hugged what appeared to be his mother. More family members emerged from the buildings. Hassan lifted a small girl into his arms, spinning her around, while she laughed. Sarah's crosshairs centered on his chest. The shot was perfect. Clear line of sight, no wind, optimal range. One squeeze and the mission would be complete. But Sarah hesitated again. Through her scope, she watched Hassan hand the little girl a wrapped package. The child tore it open eagerly, revealing a small doll. Her excited squeals carried across the valley. Hassan looked around the compound with genuine warmth, talking animatedly with relatives he had not seen in months. Marcus checked his watch impatiently. "Sarah, we're running out of time. Command wants confirmation of the kill before Hassan leaves." Sarah knew the rules of engagement. She knew her duty. She knew that Hassan would return to planning attacks that would kill more soldiers like her brother. But she also knew what she was seeing through that scope: a man spending time with his family, probably for the last time in months. The weight of 847 previous kills suddenly felt crushing. Each face flashed through her memory. Some had been clear enemies caught in combat. Others had been intelligence targets like Hassan. All had been human beings with families, hopes, fears. Sarah had never allowed herself to think about their personal lives before. Her radio buzzed with an urgent message from command. Intelligence indicated Hassan was planning to leave within the hour. This might be their only opportunity for months. Sarah adjusted her position slightly, feeling the familiar comfort of her rifle against her shoulder. The weapon had never failed her. Her training had never failed her. But today, everything felt different. Hassan set the little girl down and began walking toward the compound's center, where several men in military clothing waited for him. The family gathering was ending. The military meeting was beginning. Sarah's window of opportunity was opening, just as intelligence had predicted. She centered the crosshairs on Hassan's chest once again. Her finger moved to the trigger. The shot was still perfect, 3,200 meters, well within her capability range. She had made longer shots in worse conditions. This should be routine, but Sarah found herself thinking about the little girl with the doll. She thought about Hassan's mother, who had run to embrace her son. She thought about her own mother, who worried every day about her daughter fighting in a distant war. The moment stretched endlessly. Sarah's training battled with her conscience. Her duty confronted her humanity. Everything she had been taught as a soldier said to take the shot. Everything she felt as a person said to wait and watch. Marcus sensed her struggle but remained silent. He had worked with Sarah long enough to know that pushing her would be counterproductive. She was the best sniper he had ever seen, and part of that skill came from her ability to make split-second decisions under pressure. Sarah closed her eyes for just a moment, taking a deep breath that tasted of dust and distant smoke. When she opened them again, Hassan was still in her crosshairs, still surrounded by the evidence of a life beyond warfare. The decision she made in the next few seconds would change everything. Sarah's finger remained poised on the trigger as Hassan moved toward the military personnel, waiting in the compound's center. Through her scope, she could see the transformation happening. The loving father and son was becoming the Taliban commander. His posture straightened, his expression hardened, his gestures became more authoritative. This was the moment command had been waiting for. Hassan was now clearly identified as the target, surrounded by other military figures, away from the civilian family members. The shot would be clean, justified, and complete the mission perfectly. But Sarah's mind kept returning to the image of Hassan spinning that little girl in the air. She tried to push the thought away, focusing on her duty and the lives that would be saved by eliminating this threat. Her training kicked in automatically: breathing control, heart rate regulation, environmental assessment. Marcus whispered urgently through the radio. "Sarah, multiple vehicles are approaching from the east. We may lose this opportunity if we wait much longer." Sarah could see the dust clouds in the distance through her peripheral vision. More Taliban forces were arriving, which would complicate any extraction if she took the shot now. Standard protocol would be to abort the mission and wait for another opportunity. But intelligence had made it clear. Another opportunity might not come for months. Hassan gestured toward a table where maps were spread out. Even from 3,200 meters away, Sarah could see the tactical nature of their meeting. This was exactly what intelligence had predicted. He was planning something significant, something that would likely cost coalition lives if allowed to proceed. Sarah remembered her briefing about Hassan's previous operations. The roadside bombs that had killed a convoy of medics. The ambush that had claimed an entire patrol unit. The suicide attack on a school where soldiers had been distributing supplies to children. Each incident bore Hassan's tactical signature, her resolve began to strengthen. This was not just about one man, it was about preventing future casualties. The little girl with the doll would grow up without a father, but countless other children would grow up with their parents because Hassan's war would end today. Sarah adjusted her scope's focus, bringing Hassan's figure into crystal clarity. She could see individual details now: the scar on his left hand, the way he pointed at specific locations on the maps, the deference shown by the other commanders around him. This was clearly a high-value target. The wind had died down completely, creating perfect shooting conditions. Sarah's breathing became automatic, her body settling into the familiar rhythm of a precision shot. She had made this same preparation hundreds of times before. The routine was comforting, predictable, reliable. But then Hassan looked up from the maps and glanced back toward the family compound. Even at this distance, Sarah could see him smile slightly as he watched the children playing. The same warmth she had observed earlier flickered across his face before he turned back to the military discussion. That momentary glimpse of humanity hit Sarah harder than she expected. She had spent 4 years training herself to see targets as threats rather than people. It was the only way to do this job effectively. But something about this mission was breaking down those carefully constructed mental barriers. Marcus sensed her continued hesitation, Talk to me, Sarah. What's going on? Sarah kept her voice steady and professional, assessing the tactical situation. Multiple complications on site. It was partially true. The arriving vehicles did complicate matters, but the real complication was internal, a crisis of conscience that Sarah had never experienced during a mission. She had always been able to separate her personal feelings from her professional duties. Today, that separation was failing. Through her scope, she watched Hassan point to various locations on the map, while other commanders took notes. The discussion appeared intense and detailed. Whatever they were planning was significant enough to require this level of coordination. Sarah knew that intelligence would consider this meeting itself valuable target confirmation. Her radio crackled with an update from command. Angel of Death, confirmed target acquisition, time window closing. Rapidly, Sarah responded with practiced calm. Target acquired and tracked, maintaining overwatch. The phrase Angel of Death suddenly sounded different to her own ears. She had worn the nickname like armor, proof of her effectiveness and skill. Today, it felt heavy, ominous, accusatory. She thought about what the families of her targets might call her if they knew her identity. Hassan stood up from the table and walked a few steps away from the group, pulling out what appeared to be a satellite phone. This isolation made him an even better target. No risk of collateral damage, clear shot, perfect conditions. Sarah's crosshairs followed his movement automatically. As Hassan spoke into the phone, his body language remained military and authoritative. But Sarah noticed something else. He kept glancing back toward his family, even while conducting what was obviously military business. Part of his attention remained with his loved ones. Sarah realized she was seeing something that intelligence briefings never captured, the complete human being rather than just the enemy combatant. Hassan was simultaneously a loving family man and a deadly military commander. Both identities were real, both were true, both existed in the same person. The philosophical complexity of the situation struck her with unexpected force. Sarah had been trained to think in clear categories: friend or enemy, target or civilian, threat or innocent. Hassan defied these simple classifications. He was undeniably a threat to coalition forces, but he was also undeniably a human being with people who loved him. Marcus checked his watch again. Sarah, those vehicles will be here in 10 minutes. We need to make a decision. Sarah knew he was right. Once the additional Taliban forces arrived, the tactical situation would become too complex for a clean shot and safe extraction. This was likely their only window of opportunity. Command would expect action soon, or they would abort the mission. Hassan finished his phone conversation and returned to the group around the table. The discussion became more animated, with several commanders speaking at once. Sarah could see the intensity even from this distance. Whatever they were planning was reaching a critical decision point. Her finger returned to the trigger as years of training and discipline reasserted themselves. She was a soldier first, a philosopher never. Her job was to eliminate threats to her fellow service members and complete assigned missions. Personal feelings had no place in combat operations, but as Sarah prepared for the shot that would define her career, Hassan made an unexpected gesture. He pulled out a photograph from his pocket and showed it to the other commanders. Even through her scope, Sarah could see them smile and nod appreciatively. Hassan was sharing a family photo during a military planning session. The image of a hardened Taliban commander showing off pictures of his children to his fellow warriors created a cognitive dissonance that Sarah could not resolve. She found herself seeing Hassan not as a target, but as a person who was both an enemy and a father, both a threat and a human being. The distant rumble of approaching vehicles grew louder as Sarah maintained her sight picture on Hassan. Through her scope, she watched him carefully fold the family photograph and return it to his pocket. The tender gesture seemed impossible to reconcile with the intelligence reports describing his brutal tactical decisions. Marcus positioned himself to monitor the eastern approach route while keeping communication with their extraction team. Sarah, we've got maybe 5 minutes before this gets complicated. Command is asking for immediate confirmation. Sarah's breathing remained controlled, but her mind raced through possibilities. She thought about her military oath, her duty to protect fellow soldiers, and the clear mission parameters. She also thought about the little girl who would never see her father again, and the elderly mother who had run to embrace her son. Hassan moved away from the tactical discussion and walked toward the edge of the compound. For a moment, he stood, alone, looking out over the valley where he had grown up. Sarah could see his profile clearly: strong jaw, weathered face, eyes that seemed to carry the weight of years of conflict. This was the perfect shot opportunity. Hassan isolated from other personnel, standing still in clear view, optimal range and conditions. Sarah's training screamed at her to take it. Every tactical consideration supported immediate action. Her finger applied slight pressure to the trigger. But then Hassan did something unexpected. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small, carved wooden toy, clearly handmade, probably by one of his children. He held it up to catch the sunlight, examining it with the careful attention of a father treasuring a gift from his child. Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Through 847 previous kills, she had maintained emotional distance by focusing on the threat rather than the person. She had been successful because she could see enemies as targets, rather than human beings with families, hopes, and loves. Hassan returned the wooden toy to his pocket and walked back toward the military group. The tactical meeting resumed with increased urgency as the sound of approaching vehicles became more apparent. Maps were rolled up, weapons were checked, and orders were distributed. Whatever operation they had been planning was moving into action phase. Sarah's radio buzzed with increasing urgency from command. Angel of Death, time critical. Confirm shot or abort mission. Enemy reinforcements approaching your sector. Marcus looked at her through his binoculars, reading the conflict in her body language. In 4 years of partnership, he had never seen Sarah hesitate during a mission. She was known for decisive action and clean execution. Today, something fundamental had changed. "Sarah," Marcus whispered, "whatever's going on in your head, we need to make a call now. Those vehicles will be here in 3 minutes." Sarah knew he was right. Combat situations demanded quick decisions. Hesitation got people killed. Sometimes the enemy, sometimes your own team, sometimes innocent bystanders. Military training existed specifically to overcome natural human reluctance to kill other human beings. Through her scope, she watched Hassan give final instructions to his commanders. His gestures were confident and authoritative. This was clearly a leader coordinating significant military action. Intelligence had been correct about his importance and threat level. Sarah remembered her brother Tommy's funeral, the flag-draped casket, her mother's tears, the military honor guard. Tommy had died because people like Hassan planned operations that killed young soldiers who just wanted to serve their country and return home safely. Her resolve strengthened as she thought about Tommy and all the other coalition casualties attributed to Hassan's tactical planning. This was not about philosophical questions regarding the nature of warfare. This was about protecting people like Tommy from future attacks. Hassan moved toward the center of the compound where a vehicle was waiting. He would be leaving soon, and with him would go months of intelligence gathering and operational planning. The next opportunity might not come for a very long time, if ever. Sarah's crosshairs settled on Hassan's center mass as he paused to speak with one of his commanders. The shot was textbook perfect. Clear line of sight, no wind interference, optimal range for her weapon system, target stationary and isolated. Her finger moved to the trigger with practiced precision. Years of training had programmed this response. Breathe, aim, squeeze, follow through. She had executed this sequence hundreds of times in training and dozens of times in combat. It was automatic, reliable, effective. But as Sarah began her final trigger squeeze, Hassan turned slightly and looked back toward the family compound one more time. Through her scope, she could see him smile as he watched his daughter playing with the doll he had given her. The expression on his face was pure paternal love. Sarah's finger froze on the trigger. The shot was still perfect, the conditions ideal, the tactical situation clear. but she could not complete the trigger squeeze that would end Hassan's life. While he was looking at his daughter with such obvious affection, Marcus sensed her pause and whispered urgently, "Sarah, now or never." "Those vehicles are almost here." Through her peripheral vision, Sarah could see the dust clouds getting closer. Taliban reinforcements would arrive within minutes, completely changing the tactical situation. This was indeed now or never for the mission. Hassan finished his conversation and began walking toward the waiting vehicle. In 30 seconds, he would be inside and driving away, protected by armor and surrounded by guards. The perfect shot opportunity was slipping away with each step he took. Sarah's training battled with her conscience as she tracked Hassan's movement through her scope. Everything she had learned as a soldier demanded that she take the shot immediately. Everything she felt as a human being demanded that she find another way. The wooden toy Hassan had shown earlier seemed to symbolize everything Sarah was struggling with. It represented innocence, family love, and the hope that children might grow up in a world without war. But it also represented the complex reality that enemies were not just enemies. They were also fathers, sons, and human beings. Hassan reached the vehicle and placed his hand on the door handle. Sarah's last clear shot opportunity was disappearing, rapidly. In seconds, he would be inside the vehicle and protected by armor plating. The mission would be a failure, and command would want explanations. As Sarah watched Hassan prepare to leave, she made a decision that would change everything about her military career and her understanding of what it meant to be a soldier. Her finger moved away from the trigger as she whispered into her radio. "Command, target is departing. Mission window is closed." But even as she spoke those words, Sarah knew she had not told the complete truth. The mission window had not closed due to tactical complications. It had closed because she had chosen to close it, because she had decided that some shots should not be taken even when they could be. Hassan climbed into the vehicle and closed the door just as the first Taliban reinforcement truck crested the hill. Sarah watched through her scope as the convoy formed up for departure, knowing that her decision had just changed the course of multiple lives, Hassan's, his family's, her own, and potentially countless others. Marcus lowered his binoculars and looked at Sarah with confusion and concern. In 4 years of working together, he had never seen her abort a clear shot opportunity. "Sarah, what just happened? That was a perfect setup." Sarah kept her eye on the scope, tracking the departing vehicles as they wound down the mountain road. Tactical situation became compromised. Too many variables, too much risk for clean extraction. But both of them knew that was not entirely true. Sarah had made successful shots under much more challenging circumstances. Marcus had seen her take down targets with enemy forces much closer than today's Taliban reinforcements. Something else had influenced her decision. Command's voice crackled through the radio with obvious frustration. "Angel of Death, explain. Mission abort. Intelligence indicates perfect conditions for target elimination." Sarah responded with professional calm while her mind raced through the implications of what she had done. Multiple enemy vehicles arrived ahead of schedule. Target acquired defensive positioning before clear shot opportunity developed. The explanation was technically accurate but incomplete. Sarah had indeed had multiple clear shot opportunities before the reinforcements arrived. She had chosen not to take them for reasons she was not sure she could explain even to herself. Marcus began packing up his observation equipment while keeping one eye on the valley below. "Command wants us at Extraction Point Alpha in 30 minutes for debrief. This is going to be interesting." Sarah carefully secured her rifle and began the process of erasing any evidence of their position. Years of training had made these post-mission procedures automatic, but today everything felt different. She was no longer the same person who had taken position here 3 days ago. As they prepared to leave the overlook, Sarah took one last look at the compound below. Hassan's family was still there, still unaware of how close they had come to tragedy. The little girl continued playing with her doll while her grandmother watched with obvious affection. The sight reinforced Sarah's decision while simultaneously filling her with doubt. Had she saved an innocent family from unnecessary grief, or had she allowed a dangerous enemy to escape and potentially kill more coalition soldiers? The moral complexity of the situation felt overwhelming. Marcus noticed her lingering gaze toward the compound. "Sarah, we need to move. You can process whatever happened here later. Right now, we need to focus on getting out safely." Sarah nodded and followed Marcus down the rocky slope toward their extraction point. But with each step away from the overlook, she felt the weight of her decision growing heavier. She had broken the most fundamental rule of military service. She had allowed personal feelings to override mission objectives. During the hike to the extraction zone, Sarah's mind replayed the entire scenario repeatedly. She analyzed every moment when she could have taken the shot, every reason why she should have completed the mission, every possible consequence of her decision. The tactical arguments for taking the shot were overwhelming. Hassan was a confirmed, high-value target responsible for multiple coalition casualties. Intelligence had been planning this operation for months. Another opportunity might not present itself for a very long time. Military effectiveness depended on soldiers following orders and completing missions. But Sarah also remembered the expression on Hassan's face when he looked at his daughter. She remembered the wooden toy he had treasured. She remembered the elderly mother who had embraced her son with such obvious joy. These images would not leave her mind. Marcus maintained radio silence during their movement, but Sarah could sense his concern. They had developed an almost telepathic communication during their partnership, and he knew something significant had happened on that overlook beyond a simple mission abort. As they reached the extraction point, Sarah saw their helicopter approaching from the south. Soon she would be back at base, facing questions from command about why she had failed to complete a mission that appeared perfect from an operational standpoint. Major Rodriguez was waiting when they landed at the forward operating base. His expression was serious but not angry, more puzzled than accusatory. Sarah had never failed to complete an assigned mission before, and her reputation for reliability was legendary throughout the special operations community. "Sarah, Marcus, debrief room in 15 minutes. Command wants a detailed explanation of what happened out there," Rodriguez said as they disembarked from the helicopter. Sarah nodded professionally while her stomach churned with anxiety. How could she explain that she had allowed personal feelings to override military duty? How could she admit that she had seen the target as a human being rather than an enemy? How could she justify potentially putting future coalition lives at risk? In the debrief room, Sarah faced a panel of senior officers who had been planning and coordinating Hassan's elimination for months. Colonel Stevens, the mission commander, led the questioning with professional but pointed inquiries. "Sergeant Mitchell, your mission report indicates tactical complications prevented target engagement. Please provide specific details about these complications." Sarah had prepared for this question during the flight back to base. She provided a technically accurate but incomplete account of the Taliban reinforcements, the timing complications, and the risk assessment that had led to mission abort. Colonel Stevens studied the intelligence reports while Sarah spoke. "Our satellite imagery shows the enemy reinforcements arrived approximately 4 minutes after your reported mission abort. You had clear target acquisition for an extended period before any tactical complications developed." The room fell silent as the implication of Stevens' observation became clear. Sarah had aborted the mission before the complications she had cited as reasons for the abort had actually occurred. She felt the weight of multiple senior officers' attention focused on her. Marcus spoke up to support his partner. "Sir, field conditions often develop faster than satellite imagery can track. Sergeant Mitchell's situational assessment was based on real-time tactical considerations." Sarah appreciated Marcus's attempt to provide cover, but she knew the explanation would not satisfy a detailed investigation. Her decision had been based on factors that had nothing to do with tactical considerations, and eventually, the truth would emerge. Colonel Stevens continued his questioning with the methodical precision of an experienced investigator. "Sergeant Mitchell, in your professional assessment, did you have adequate shot opportunities before the arrival of enemy reinforcements?" This was the question Sarah had been dreading. A direct lie to a superior officer would end her military career immediately. But the truth would be even more devastating to her reputation and future service opportunities. Sarah looked directly at Colonel Stevens and made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. "Yes, sir. I had multiple clear shot opportunities throughout the observation period. The admission created another moment of tense silence in the debrief room. If Sarah had clear shot opportunities and no tactical complications prevented engagement, then her failure to complete the mission demanded a more complex explanation. Colonel Stevens leaned forward in his chair, his expression shifting from puzzled to concerned. Sergeant Mitchell, if you had clear shots available and no tactical impediments, why did you abort the mission? Sarah took a deep breath and made the most difficult decision of her military career. She looked directly at Colonel Stevens and chose truth over career preservation. Sir, I observed the target in close proximity to civilian family members, including small children. The tactical situation included significant non-combatant presence throughout the observation period. Colonel Stevens frowned and consulted his briefing materials. Sergeant Mitchell, the intelligence report indicated, Hassan would be conducting military planning meetings at this location. Civilian presence was noted as minimal and separated from the target area. Sir, the intelligence was incomplete. Hassan spent extensive time with family members, including young children, before and during the military meetings. The target regularly moved between family areas and military areas throughout the observation period. Major Rodriguez, who had remained quiet during the initial questioning, spoke up. Sarah, are you saying the mission parameters changed due to civilian proximity concerns? Sarah knew she was walking into dangerous territory. Military snipers were trained to operate in complex environments where civilians and combatants often mixed. Her 847 previous confirmed kills had included many situations with potential civilian complications. Sir, the civilian integration was more extensive than anticipated. The target's behavior patterns created a situation where engagement would have resulted in significant psychological trauma for non-combatant family members, particularly children. Colonel Stevens studied Sarah carefully. He had reviewed her service record and psychological evaluations before this mission. She had never shown previous concerns about civilian psychological impact. Sergeant Mitchell, explain how civilian psychological considerations affected your tactical decision-making. Sarah realized she was about to end her military career, but she could not lie to her commanding officers about what had happened on that overlook. Sir, I observed the target engaging in normal family activities with his young daughter. The child was present and playing nearby during multiple clear shot opportunities. The room's atmosphere shifted as the senior officers began to understand what had actually happened. Sarah had not aborted the mission due to tactical complications or even civilian safety concerns. She had aborted because she could not bring herself to kill a father in front of his child. Marcus looked at Sarah with surprise and concern. Even he had not fully understood the emotional impact the family scene had created for his partner. He had seen the hesitation but had not realized the depth of Sarah's internal conflict. Colonel Stevens closed the briefing folder and looked at Sarah with an expression that mixed disappointment with sympathy. Sergeant Mitchell, in your 4 years of combat operations, you have never reported concerns about civilian psychological impact. What made this situation different? Sarah knew this question went to the heart of everything she had been struggling with since the mission began. How could she explain that watching Hassan play with his daughter had humanized him in a way that made killing him feel like murder rather than military action? Sir, I have never previously observed a high-value target in such intimate family interaction before engagement. The psychological impact on the child specifically created operational considerations that I felt outweighed mission completion. Major Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, processing the implications of Sarah's admission. Are you saying you chose not to complete the mission because you were concerned about traumatizing the target's daughter? Yes, sir. That was a significant factor in my decision-making process. The admission created a moment of stunned silence. Senior military officers were familiar with mission aborts due to tactical complications, civilian casualties, or equipment failures. They were not familiar with mission aborts due to concern for enemy family members' emotional well-being. Colonel Stevens spoke carefully, choosing his words with obvious consideration for the complexity of the situation. Sergeant Mitchell, you understand that Hassan's continued operations will likely result in coalition casualties. Yes, sir. I understand the potential consequences of allowing the target to remain operational. And you understand that your decision potentially places American and Allied lives at increased risk? Yes, sir. Given those considerations, do you believe you made the correct tactical decision? Sarah paused before answering, knowing that her response would determine her military future. She thought about Tommy, about her fellow soldiers, about the mission objectives, and about the little girl with the wooden doll. Sir, I believe I made the only decision I could live with. I could not kill a father while his young daughter was watching and playing nearby. The psychological trauma to that child would have been severe and permanent. Colonel Stevens studied Sarah for a long moment before speaking. Sergeant Mitchell, your service record is exemplary. Your tactical skills are among the best in the military. But combat operations require soldiers to make difficult decisions based on mission parameters, rather than personal feelings. Sarah nodded, understanding the criticism implicit in his statement. Yes, sir. I understand that my decision prioritized non-combatant psychological welfare over mission completion. Major Rodriguez spoke up again. Sarah, we need to understand whether this represents a temporary emotional response or a fundamental change in your ability to execute combat missions. The question cut to the core of Sarah's dilemma. She had spent 4 years successfully compartmentalizing the human cost of her work. She had been able to see targets as threats rather than people, enemies rather than human beings with families and loves. But something had changed on that overlook. Hassan's interaction with his daughter had broken down the psychological barriers that had allowed her to function effectively as a military sniper. She was no longer sure she could return to seeing targets as objects rather than people. Sir, I believe my ability to execute future missions may be compromised by the psychological impact of this observation. I may need to reassess my role in combat operations. The admission was devastating for Sarah to make, but she knew it was honest. She could not guarantee that she would be able to take necessary shots in future missions if they involved similar family considerations. Colonel Stevens exchanged glances with the other officers before responding. Sergeant Mitchell, we're going to recommend you for psychological evaluation and temporary reassignment to non-combat duties pending assessment results. Sarah had expected this outcome, but hearing it officially still felt like a punch to the stomach. Her military career, her identity as a soldier, her sense of purpose, all of it was being suspended because she had chosen humanity over duty. But as Sarah left the debrief room, she thought again about the little girl with the doll and realized she would make the same decision again. Some things were more important than military careers, including the psychological welfare of innocent children. Marcus caught up with her outside the debrief room. Sarah, are you okay? I had no idea you were dealing with all of that up there. Sarah looked at her longtime partner and friend. Marcus, I've been killing people for 4 years without really thinking about who they were beyond the mission parameters. Today I saw Hassan as a father first and an enemy second. I don't know if I can go back to seeing people as targets. Marcus nodded with understanding. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe it makes you more human rather than less effective. Sarah hoped he was right, but she also knew that being more human might mean being less able to serve as a soldier in combat operations. The angel of death might have died on that overlook, but Sarah was not sure who would take her place. 3 months later, Sarah sat in a small office at Walter Reed Medical Center, facing Dr. Elizabeth Kane, a military psychologist specializing in combat stress and moral injury. The psychological evaluation had been thorough and revealing, uncovering layers of suppressed emotion and internal conflict that Sarah had not even realized existed. Sarah, your test results indicate significant moral injury related to your combat experiences, Dr. Kane explained gently. This is not uncommon among soldiers who have been in combat for extended periods, especially those in high-stress positions, like sniper operations. Sarah looked out the window at the hospital grounds where wounded veterans were walking with their families. Many of them bore visible injuries from their service. Sarah's wounds were invisible, but equally real. Dr. Kane, does this mean I can't return to combat operations? It means you're processing the human cost of warfare in a way that many soldiers eventually do. The fact that you could no longer see Hassan purely as a target, but also as a father and human being, indicates emotional and moral development rather than weakness. The assessment surprised Sarah. She had expected to be diagnosed with some form of combat-related psychological disorder that would end her military career. Instead, Dr. Kane